really, how you can deal with the traumatized child and develop a strong enough adult to stay in the here and now.
Yeah, yeah.
But you have to confront your demons in your child first.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's it's a remarkable book. I would, if you ever have time to read it, it's one of those books which is, it's a bit like Viktor Frankl's book.
Oh, yeah.
Creative Logotherapy. It's really a book of hope and compassion and how we can survive the most terrible psychological traumas. How we can. And she became a psychotherapist.
Right.
And of course, talking about her ordeals, but also most of her clients are dealing with trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, flashbacks, and how to heal them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Called The Choice, and it's 2017.
Oh, The Choice. I think I've heard this. That must have been on Radio 4, maybe.
Probably. It's an award-winning book. I don't know if she's died. She's quite old now, but 90s, I would think. I'm not quite sure. Somebody says she's died since this book came out, but I'm not. I don't know if that's true. But
sure.
Remarkable woman. Remarkable.
Okay. So, should we make a start?
Yeah, yes. And the second book, by the way, is going to be on working with a child ego state, because I realise we talked about how to work with the parent ego state in the TA Simple series, but we haven't talked about how to work with the child ego state. So I thought we'd better do that before we go on to look at TA identity and all that stuff we talked about. We must talk about how to work with the child.
Okay. All right. So make a start.
Okie dokie, boy.
Okay, here we go. In 5, 4, 3. Hello and welcome to MIP TV. And with me, as always, is Bob Cook with one of his fab book reviews. And this is the first book review of 2019.
Yes.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yeah. And it's an interesting book. And it's written by Edith Eger.
Yes.
She's a psychotherapist. She was a survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp, a name that's synonymous with evil and just the very worst in mankind. And she went on. She was a Jewish person, a Jewish heritage person, and she went on to become a psychotherapist. And this book talks, to some extent, as Bob will explain, about how she mapped her experiences to, I guess, becoming a psychotherapist and what she psychologically understood from it.
Correct. It's very apt, very, very apt. This is the first book of 2019, because as I look forward to 2019 and Brexit and everything else that goes with it, it's quite easy for me to go to quite a despairing place. But, reading this book, which is all about hope, compassion, it's such a wonderful way to start 2019, I think. So basically, this person was, you're right, Jewish heritage, and she was 16 when she was rounded up, if that's the right word. I don't really like it, but rounded up by the Germans, of course, and taken to the concentration camp. And it's how she survived psychologically, physically. And the story is a remarkable story for all of us, of survival and hope, which comes from the depths of evil and trauma, if you like. So the story, her story starts off with her being 16 and her mother and her sister called Magla, and the Germans come knocking. They round up the father, the mother, separate out the two sisters, and take them to different concentration camps. The father gets killed, and the mother gets shot as well. We find out later in the book. And it's how she survives with her sister, and how the two siblings call on each other to be able to, survive. Really survive at a basic level.
And this isn't the first book that discusses survival in a concentration camp, because very famously Viktor Frankl wrote his ideas, and this very existential view of people having purpose in life. People who have purpose tended to survive. Is there any parallel with Frankl's observations in this piece of work, Bob?
Yeah, there's a book I've alluded to in other book reviews called From Death Camp to Existentialism by Frankl and Bruno Bettelheim, who was a famous psychoanalyst, or became a famous psychoanalyst, and opened the Charles Psychoanalytical Unit in New York after, the concentration camp experiences. But you're right, it's about purpose, hope, meaning, what existence is about, how we exist when we really, survival is the main ingredient of the day. I mean, she talks about most of her time was about surviving, staying in the here and now, getting by one day at a time. So if she can survive one day, she can survive the next day. So if she survives one day, she's free to go to the next day. But being in the here and now, and not getting caught up in the past or the fantasies of the future, really, surviving one day at a time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a huge parallel between what you've just stated and the experience of this, the author in the book, and what a lot of survivors of abuse go through in surviving their own abusive histories, literally one day at a time, becoming present in the here and now, which is quite telling. The other thing, and I think it's useful for those people who are wondering what existentialism is. It was a direct reaction, a philosophical reaction to what happened during the Second World War. I think we shouldn't forget that. People like Sartre and Albert Camus, or Albert Camus, I think he's probably French, so we'll call him. They developed this idea of existentialism and absurdism and nihilism as a direct pushback to the horrors of the Second World War. This idea of living in absolute reality, I guess without the intervention of a deity. So, for those of you who wondered what existentialism is, that's it in a nutshell. So, what do you think this author gives psychotherapists, and specifically student psychotherapists? What do you think?
Oh, the second half of the book, which is interesting, but it's not as, I found her story of psychological survival, dissociation, staying in the here and now, compassion for her, the people who humiliated her, the compassion for her jailers, a bit like Nelson Mandela, who also really talked about how he got to love. I don't know if he actually said love, but certainly drew on compassion in his books and how he survived. That's such a moving, brought me to tears, really, the first part of the book. Second part of the book is her journey to be a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, and how she specialized, of course, in working with traumatized people who, coming back from many war zones, Afghanistan, and how to deal with flashbacks, particularly how to deal with the traumas and the flashbacks, which she had to first of all handle herself. So in the second half of the book, it's a lot about her own flashbacks, how she dealt with her own demons, how one day she would be thinking about the day and suddenly she's back in the horrors of those camps, and how she managed to heal herself from that position. And then she goes on to talk about how she can use those experiences to actually help heal others through post-traumatic stress disorder and their own flashbacks.
Yes, it sounds to use the title of another book, regeneration and regenerating self, and very hopeful. You said just before before we started, that it was a book of great hope.
Absolutely, because it's her message really is why it's called The Choice, is that we can choose
Mm.
We can choose to live. We can choose to confront the tormentors of the past, to deal with the compartmentalized horrors. And
Mm.
as we confront those, we can embrace our present and our future desires.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the book that Bob was reviewing today is called The Choice. It's by Edith Edgar. We're going to put a link in the comments bar below. And if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. We always like that. Or put a comment in if you've read the book, and we'll put a link in. As always, Bob doesn't get paid for these book reviews. They're just something that he loves to do and loves to share his knowledge and his kind of well-read persona to everybody. And we'll be back with another book review in the next one.
In the next one. Okay. Bye-bye.
See you later.